Right now, the foods you stockpile to survive a real crisis may be the exact reason you don't. The global food price index hit levels not seen in nearly 30 years. Grain reserves in major exporting nations have dropped to margins that haven't been this thin since the 1970s. Supply chain disruptions that were called temporary in 2020 are now a structural feature of how the global food system operates. And that's not the part that should keep you up at night. The part that should keep you up at night is this. There are people right now who believe they're prepared. They've spent real money. They've filled shelves. They've got freeze-dried meal buckets with 25-year expiration dates stacked in their garages. And they are going to discover, possibly in the middle of the worst moment of their lives, that they are not prepared at all. Because they stocked the wrong things. Or they stocked the right things in the wrong quantities. Or they built a caloric plan based on numbers that only work if you're sitting still. Most people in a real crisis are not sitting still. Today I'm giving you 7 specific foods, not 30, not a $10,000 kit, just 7, chosen for caloric efficiency, verified shelf life, nutritional completeness, and historical proof from real famines, real wars, and real economic collapses. And I'm going to show you exactly how to build this stockpile for under $200. One of those 7 items will also teach you how to grow fresh vitamin C from inside your own stockpile, using nothing but water. No garden. No seeds you don't already have. I'll get to that later, and it may completely change how you think about long-term food security. Before we start, a quick note. If you find actual verified, actionable survival information in this video, not fear, not speculation, but real information you can use, consider subscribing. I put out verified preparedness content every week. Now let's get into it. Item 1. White rice. When everything breaks down, the first thing you lose is not variety. It's not comfort. It's not the food you like. The first thing you lose is calories. And the most important truth in survival nutrition is this: without a reliable caloric foundation, every other item in your stockpile, white rice is that foundation. And the math is staggering. A standard 50-pound bag of white rice costs approximately $25 at any warehouse store right now. That 50-pound bag contains roughly 82,000 calories, at a survival intake of 1,600 calories per day, which is enough to keep one adult functional and alert at rest. That single $25 bag feeds one person for over 50 days. 2 bags covers one person for over 3 months. For $50, there is no other food on this planet that delivers that level of caloric insurance at that price. None. But here's something that most survival videos get dangerously wrong about rice. They tell you to buy rice without telling you which rice to buy. Brown rice sounds like the healthier choice, and in ordinary life it is. But brown rice retains its bran layer, and that bran layer contains natural oils. Those oils go rancid in approximately 6 months even under decent storage conditions. You can buy brown rice thinking you've secured a 2-year emergency supply and discover within a year that it smells like paint thinner and is completely inedible. White rice only. For long-term storage, always white rice. White rice stored correctly in mylar bags with oxygen absorbers inside food-grade sealed buckets has a verified shelf life of 25 to 30 years. That's not from a prepper blog. That's from long-term food storage research conducted at Brigham Young University, one of the most cited research programs in emergency preparedness science. Now here's a practical technique that almost nobody in this space talks about. When you fill a 5-gallon bucket with rice, do not dump the entire bag in loose. Divide your rice into 1-pound or 2-pound mylar sub-bags first, then place those sealed sub-bags inside the bucket. Here's why that matters. Every single time you open that bucket to scoop out rice, you're exposing every grain inside to oxygen and humidity. If all 25 pounds of rice are loose in one container, you're slowly degrading your entire supply every time you open it. Sub-bags mean you open only what you're using, and everything else stays vacuum sealed and protected. One more thing about rice that no one talks about in the context of survival. A hot bowl of cooked rice does something specific to a stressed human brain. It signals routine. It signals order. Research on disaster response has consistently found that maintaining small rituals, especially morning and evening meals with structure, is one of the key factors separating people who maintain cognitive function during prolonged crisis. Rice is a caloric foundation. It's also a psychological anchor. Build your caloric foundation in rice. Then you need to give your body the ability to actually rebuild itself. Item 2. Beans. And the math problem in your stockpile. Beans give you the ability to keep going. Here's the biology that almost never gets explained clearly in survival content. Your body needs 9 essential amino acids to build and repair muscle, produce enzymes, maintain immune function. They're called essential because your body cannot synthesize them. They have to come from food. Most plant proteins are incomplete. They give you some but not all 9. Rice is high in an amino acid called methionine, but low in lysine. Beans are high in lysine but low in methionine. Together, rice and beans, they form a complete protein. The same full amino acid profile you'd get from eating meat. That's not folk wisdom. That's biochemistry. And they deliver that complete nutrition without refrigeration, without spoilage risk, and without the fuel demands of cooking animal protein during a crisis. But here's where most people make a serious mistake in their bean storage. They buy one type, a big sack of kidney beans. Done. The problem is that different beans have drastically different cooking times. Kidney beans require up to 90 minutes of active boiling. Chickpeas can take 2 hours. In a scenario where you're rationing propane or burning firewood, a 2-hour cook time is not just inconvenient. Lentils are the solution. Lentils cook in 20 minutes. No pre-soaking required. 1 pound of dry lentils costs approximately $1.5 and delivers around 1,600 calories and 60 grams of protein. That is extraordinary nutritional density at that price. Build a diversified legume supply. Lentils for fuel-efficient emergency meals. Black beans and pintos for flavor variety and morale. Chickpeas for texture in soups. Dry beans for maximum shelf life, 25 to 30 years in proper storage according to USDA food preservation data. And keep a case of canned beans for zero fuel situations. You can eat them cold straight from the can. Now, here's the math problem I need you to hear before item 3. Because this changes how much you need to buy. The standard 1,600 calorie per day figure that gets used in survival planning, including everything I just told you about rice, is a resting metabolic rate baseline. It assumes that during your crisis, you are sitting relatively still. Sedentary, resting. But think about what an actual collapse scenario requires. You're hauling water from a source that's not your tap. You're chopping or gathering firewood. You're reinforcing your shelter. You're standing watch. You're moving supplies. You're managing stress at a level that itself burns calories at an elevated rate. Under real physical labor conditions, an adult human requires between 2,500 and 3,500 calories per day. That's the same range as a construction worker or competitive endurance athlete. Take the midpoint, 3,000 calories per day, and that $25 bag of rice that was going to last one person 50 days at rest. Your 3-month supply just became a 6-week supply. This recalculation is not a minor adjustment. It changes the quantity of everything you need to buy. Plan at 2,500 calories per day minimum as your stockpile target. If you're preparing for a physically active scenario, which every real crisis is, you should be targeting 3,000. Do the math for your household. Then buy accordingly. The good news, at current prices, even doubling your rice and bean quantities keeps your total cost under $400 for a family of 4. That's the actual survival math. Stay with me because we're about to talk about the fuel issue hiding underneath all of this. Item 3. Oats. And the fuel dependency your plan doesn't account for. The military understood this long before civilian preparedness did. Napoleon's campaigns. Wellington soldiers marching across the Iberian Peninsula. World War II field logistics. Every serious military operation in modern history arrived at the same conclusion. The quality of fuel you give soldiers in the first 2 hours of the day determines their performance for the next 10. In a collapse, breakfast isn't a luxury. It's a tactical decision. And oats win that decision consistently. Here's why at the molecular level. Oats contain a specific soluble fiber called beta-glucan. Beta-glucan forms a thick gel in your digestive tract that dramatically slows the absorption of glucose into your bloodstream. The result is a steady, sustained energy release over 4 to 6 hours, no sugar crash, no mid-morning cognitive fog, no spike followed by collapse. White rice digests quickly and gives you a glucose window of roughly 90 minutes before blood sugar begins dropping. Rice is your caloric foundation, but it is not your morning cognitive fuel. Oats are. And here's something almost no survival content will warn you about. Do not buy instant oats. Instant oats are processed more aggressively to reduce cook time, which also reduces beta-glucan density and raises the glycemic response. You lose the primary nutritional advantage oats provide. Rolled oats or steel-cut oats only. A 25-pound bag of rolled oats costs approximately $15 to $20 and delivers around 45,000 calories. Stored as whole oat groats in mylar with oxygen absorbers, shelf life extends to 30 years. A practical technique worth knowing. Grind rolled oats in any basic blender to produce oat flour. Oat flour can replace 25 to 30% of wheat flour in flatbreads and simple baked goods without meaningfully changing texture. That substitution extends your flour supply by roughly a third, which matters in a long scenario. Now stop. Because here's the problem nobody in this category ever addresses directly. Every single item on this list, rice, beans, oats, wheat berries, requires heat to cook. All of it. The only items on this entire list you can consume cold without any preparation are canned beans and honey. Everything else needs a heat source. So let's do the math. A standard 1-pound propane canister, the kind used with a camp stove, contains roughly 21,000 BTU of energy. Cooking 2 simple meals a day, a pot of oats in the morning, and rice or beans at night, requires approximately 45 to 60 minutes of active stove time. At moderate flame, a 1-pound propane canister lasts roughly 2 to 3 days of cooking. That means for a 90-day scenario, you need approximately 30 to 45 1-pound canisters. A more economical option, a 20-pound refillable propane tank, costs approximately $50 to $60 full and provides roughly 450,000 BTU, enough for approximately 30 to 40 days of regular cooking. 3 full 20-pound tanks gets you through a 90-day scenario with margin. Total cost approximately $150 to $180. If grid power goes down but natural gas remains available in your area, a dual-fuel camp stove that runs on either propane or natural gas is a $40 to $60 investment. Wood is the zero-cost option if you have outdoor space and access to timber, but it requires more time, attention, and skill than most urban and suburban households have practiced. The point is this: your food stockpile has a fuel dependency that most plans never acknowledge. Without a planned heat source, a significant portion of your carefully stored calories becomes inaccessible. Plan your fuel the same way you plan your food. Now let's talk about the item that started revolutions when it disappeared. Item 4. Flour and wheat berries, civilization in powder form. In the summer of 1789, the French people did not begin a revolution because they wanted to overturn a political system. They began it because bread disappeared. When historians trace the specific trigger for the French Revolution, not the philosophy behind it, not the decades of inequality that built toward it, but the precise ignition point, they consistently identify the bread shortages and price explosions of the summer of 1789. The harvest of 1788 had failed. Bread prices spiked to consume 80% of a working family's daily income. When bread became inaccessible, the population did not reorganize. It detonated. And when bread returned, even the most basic flatbread, even a simple dense loaf, something deeply human was restored to people who had been surviving on nothing. Flour is civilization in powder form. In a collapse, it's the difference between endurance and despair. The problem is how most people store it. They buy all-purpose flour, put it in a cabinet, and consider the problem solved. All-purpose flour has a shelf life of roughly 12 to 18 months under normal conditions. In humid or warm storage, significantly less. The natural oils in flour oxidize over time, attracting insects and producing a rancid smell and taste that makes it unusable. You buy bulk flour, thinking you've secured your supply, and within a year, you're throwing most of it away. Here's the real solution. Wheat berries. Hard red winter wheat berries are whole, unground kernels. Sealed in food-grade containers at room temperature, they carry a documented shelf life of 30 years or more. That finding is supported by long-term food storage research maintained by the LDS Church, one of the most rigorous and long-running emergency preparedness programs in the world, with systematic storage testing going back over a century. A 45-pound bucket of hard wheat berries costs approximately $30 to $40 and, once milled, produces roughly 35 pounds of usable whole wheat flour, enough for approximately 70 standard flatbreads. You do not need an electric mill. A hand-cranked grain mill costs $50 to $100 at most farm supply or online preparedness retailers, requires zero electricity, and in a grid-down scenario, the person who can produce fresh flour from whole grain on demand holds a position of practical value in their community. Because here's what bread actually accomplishes during a collapse, beyond nutrition. It's social infrastructure. When food shortages hit and barter economies emerge, people trade for things that feel like normal life. Fresh bread, even dense flatbread, even simply flavored, is something people trade medicine for. Candles. Seeds. Useful tools. The person who can bake becomes someone the community depends on. That is not just a nutrition strategy. That is a security strategy. Beyond the practical, there's something worth saying about the act of making bread itself. The physical process, mixing, kneading, shaping, waiting, baking, engages a kind of focused attention that is documented in stress psychology as a genuine coping mechanism. It provides agency, a sense of creation, a signal to your nervous system that you are building something, not just enduring something. In a prolonged crisis, that distinction keeps people functional. If you're still here at item 4, you're the kind of person who acts on information instead of just collecting it. That's worth a subscription. I release verified preparedness content every week, and the next video directly follows up on what we're building today. Now, item 5 is the one that funded armies, built empires, and costs less than $2. Item 5. Salt, the electrolyte infrastructure. The word salary comes from the Latin salarium. It refers to payments made to Roman soldiers in salt. For over 4,000 years, on every continent, across civilizations that never had contact with each other, it was considered money. The Roman Empire built and maintained the Via Salaria, the Salt Road, as one of its primary infrastructure investments because controlling salt access meant controlling the food preservation and therefore the survival of populations. China's imperial dynasties funded centuries of governance through salt monopolies. Wars were fought specifically over salt deposits. Gandhi's 1930 Salt March, a pivotal moment in the Indian independence movement, was a direct response to British colonial control over salt production. Salt wasn't currency because people liked how it tasted. Salt was currency because it was the only technology that could preserve meat, fish, and vegetables without refrigeration. It was the original food security system for the entire human race. In a grid-down collapse, it becomes that system again. Here's the physiology most people haven't thought through. Sodium is an electrolyte, meaning it is essential for electrical signal transmission in your nervous system. Every thought you have, every voluntary muscle movement you make, every heartbeat requires sodium to function. In a survival scenario involving hard physical labor, hauling water, chopping firewood, building or reinforcing shelter, sweat contains significant concentrations of sodium. As your sodium levels drop, your body develops a condition called hyponatremia. Early symptoms of hyponatremia look like ordinary exhaustion, confusion, fatigue, muscle cramping, but the progression is serious. At advanced stages, nausea, vomiting, seizures, loss of consciousness. In untreated severe cases, death. And here's the counterintuitive part that genuinely surprises most people. If you are drinking water to rehydrate but not replacing the sodium you've sweated out, you can accelerate hyponatremia rather than prevent it. Your body requires sodium to process water and maintain the electrical balance across cell membranes. Drinking pure water in large quantities, without electrolyte replacement, dilutes your remaining sodium faster. Most people in preparedness circles think of dehydration as their primary water-related survival threat. Hyponatremia, electrolyte imbalance, is equally serious and far less discussed. Now here's what makes salt extraordinary, beyond its biological necessity. Salt is a preservation multiplier. It exponentially extends the usefulness of everything else in your stockpile. Salt-cured meat can last weeks without any refrigeration. Salt-brined vegetables ferment into nutrient-dense lacto-fermented foods that store for months. Importantly, generate natural probiotics that support gut health during a period when your diet is highly restricted. In a prolonged collapse where fresh food becomes a memory, salt gives you a preservation and fermentation capability. The storage case is overwhelming. A 4-pound canister of iodized salt costs under $2. It contains approximately 870 teaspoons, roughly a 2-year supply for one adult. And iodized specifically for a reason most people overlook. Iodine deficiency causes thyroid dysfunction and significant cognitive impairment. In a crisis scenario with a severely restricted diet, no fish, no dairy, no eggs, iodized salt may be your only source of dietary iodine. That cognitive protection is worth noting explicitly. Salt stored in a sealed, airtight container has an essentially infinite shelf life. The FDA lists no expiration requirement for pure salt. It does not spoil. It does not degrade. It does not attract pests. It does not require mylar bags or oxygen absorbers. Buy 10 canisters. That is $20. You've just secured salt for a decade, added a preservation and fermentation capability to everything else in your stockpile, and protected yourself from the electrolyte collapse that takes down unprepared people faster than hunger ever could. There is one item coming next that Howard Carter found perfectly preserved inside a 3,000-year-old Egyptian tomb. But I need to warn you about something before you buy it, because most of what gets sold as honey in American grocery stores. I'll tell you exactly what that means and how to verify what you're buying. Item 6. Honey, and the scam hiding in your grocery store. In 1922, Howard Carter's team broke through the sealed inner chambers of Tutankhamun's tomb. They found gold, carved artifacts, objects that had not been touched in 3,000 years. They also found sealed clay vessels containing honey. Carefully analyzed by the archaeologists on site and by subsequent researchers, the honey was found to be still edible. 3,000 years old. Still edible. No other natural food on Earth does this. Not grain. Not salt. Not any freeze-dried survival product with a 25-year printed expiration. Honey properly sealed does not expire. Honey found in Egyptian tombs spanning multiple dynasties has been tested and confirmed edible. The same honey harvested by a beekeeper in 1000 BC remains chemically stable today. Understanding why honey doesn't expire reveals exactly why it's one of the most powerful tools on this list. Honey survives because of 3 simultaneous preservation mechanisms working together. First, its water activity. The measure of free water available for microbial growth is so low that virtually no bacteria or mold can survive inside it. The sugar concentration is so dense that it pulls water out of any microorganism that enters the jar and kills it through osmosis. Second, honey contains an enzyme called glucose oxidase. When honey is diluted by moisture, when you eat it or when an improperly sealed jar absorbs environmental humidity, this enzyme activates and produces hydrogen peroxide, a natural antimicrobial compound. Third, honey's pH sits between 3.2 and 4.5, which is highly acidic enough to kill most pathogenic bacteria, including both Salmonella and E. coli. No synthetic preservative replicates all 3 of these mechanisms simultaneously. Honey is a naturally engineered preservation system. And honey is also a field medical tool. The antimicrobial properties of honey are used in modern clinical wound care. Manuka honey, produced from New Zealand tea tree blossoms, is FDA approved and used in licensed medical dressings. The underlying mechanism, that hydrogen peroxide production, that acidic environment, exists in all raw honey. In a scenario where antibiotics run out and a wound becomes infected, raw honey applied to a cut provides a natural antibacterial barrier that can help prevent further infection while supporting the healing process. 1 jar of honey is not just a food item. It is a caloric source, a morale booster, a natural sweetener that makes oats and flatbreads feel like actual meals, and a field medical supply with a documented clinical basis. A 5-pound jar of raw honey provides approximately 7,600 calories. It costs $20 to $30. No mylar bags required. No oxygen absorbers. Seal it in its glass jar, store at room temperature away from direct sunlight, and the shelf life is for all practical purposes indefinite. Now here's what I promised you. The problem hiding inside almost every survival pantry in America. A 2011 investigation by Food Safety News, which was subsequently followed by academic studies and additional reporting, found that a substantial percentage of honey sold in American grocery stores had been ultra-filtered. Ultra-filtering is a commercial processing method that removes pollen from honey. From a regulatory standpoint, honey with its pollen removed cannot be verified as to origin, meaning it cannot be confirmed to come from actual bees, from safe geographic sources, or to contain the natural compounds that give honey its preservation and medicinal properties. Some samples analyzed in these investigations contained additives, including corn syrup. Adulterated honey, or ultra-filtered honey, loses the triple preservation mechanism. It loses the glucose oxidase enzyme activity. It loses the authentic pH profile. You buy something labeled honey, you put it in your stockpile, believing it will last forever and treat wounds, and you've bought processed sugar syrup with a 6-month shelf life. How do you verify you're buying real honey? Look specifically for raw and unfiltered on the label. Real raw honey is typically cloudier than ultra-filtered commercial honey. The cloudiness comes from natural pollen. If the honey is perfectly clear, perfectly golden, and perfectly uniform, it has likely been processed in ways that reduce its long-term utility. Local beekeepers, farmers markets, and health food stores with direct sourcing claims are your most reliable options. If you buy from a large grocery chain, look for brands that explicitly state raw and unfiltered, not just natural. Crystallized honey is not spoiled honey. Crystallization is a natural process where the glucose component solidifies. It's actually a marker of minimally processed, high-quality honey. Place a crystallized jar in warm water for 15 to 20 minutes, and it returns to liquid. Do not microwave it. That destroys beneficial enzymes. Simply warm gently and slowly. The shelf life of authentic honey outlasts every government in human history. Buy the right honey, store it correctly, and it will be there whenever you need it. Item 7 is the cheapest item on this list. It takes up less space than a deck of cards. And without it, you will be physically deteriorating by day 60, even with everything else we've talked about today sitting fully stocked in your storage room. I'm going to tell you exactly why, and then I'm going to give you a solution that costs nothing beyond what you've already bought. Item 7, vitamin C and the free backup growing in your stockpile between 1,500 and 1,800. Not from storms. Not from enemy navies. Not from the dangers of navigation in uncharted water. From the absence of a single molecule. Scurvy. Vitamin C deficiency. And naval historians who've studied this period consistently describe it as the single largest cause of maritime death during the age of exploration, killing more sailors than every other cause of death at sea combined during those 3 centuries. Here is the critical fact that every survival stockpile video leaves out. The 7 foods on this list contain essentially zero vitamin C. Your body cannot produce vitamin C on its own. It is an essential micronutrient that must come from food. And your body's stored vitamin C is fully depleted in approximately 4 to 8 weeks on a diet with no fresh produce. What happens after depletion is a timeline no one wants to live through, but you need to understand it clearly. In weeks 4 through 8, you experience profound fatigue, persistent irritability, and a depression that presents like psychological collapse. People in this stage have been misdiagnosed as experiencing emotional breakdown when the problem is entirely biochemical. In weeks 8 through 12, the physical symptoms become undeniable. Joint pain, swelling in the legs, gum tissue begins to break down, teeth loosen, and in historically documented scurvy cases, old wounds that healed years ago begin to reopen because vitamin C is essential for collagen synthesis, the protein that structurally maintains your tissue. Without it, your body cannot hold itself together. Week 12 and beyond, spontaneous hemorrhaging under the skin, wounds that will not heal under any circumstances. In severe untreated cases, death. The sailors who died on those ships during the age of exploration had food. They had calories. They had protein from salt-preserved meat and carbohydrates from hardtack biscuits. They were eating every day. And they were dying from a deficiency that could have been prevented with 10 milligrams of vitamin C daily, the amount in a small wedge of lemon. The solution was identified in 1747 by Scottish naval surgeon James Lind, conducting what many historians of medicine regard as the first controlled clinical trial ever performed. He divided scurvy-affected sailors into groups and tested different proposed remedies. Sailors given citrus fruits recovered within 6 days. The others continued to deteriorate. The evidence was clear, documented and published. And sailors kept dying for another 50 years because the establishment refused to act on evidence that contradicted existing practice. Don't be the establishment. Act on what the evidence tells you. A 365-count bottle of vitamin C tablets at 1,000 milligrams each cost approximately $12 to $15. That is 1 tablet per day for 1 full year for 1 person. The recommended daily intake for adults is 65 to 90 milligrams. A single 1,000 milligram tablet provides over 10 times that minimum. Your safety margin is enormous. For a family of 4, you need 4 bottles. Total cost approximately $50 to $60. That investment may deliver more value per dollar than any other single item in this video, because without it, 6 perfectly stocked items in your storage room can keep you calorically alive. Add a basic daily multivitamin. In a long-term restricted diet, vitamin D deficiency, zinc deficiency, B12 deficiency, and iron deficiency all develop more slowly than vitamin C deficiency, but become genuinely serious over months. A year's supply of multivitamins costs $15 to $20. This is not optional if you're planning for scenarios that last longer than 30 days. Now here's the thing I promised you in the hook, the one that costs nothing beyond what you've already stockpiled. Any dry lentil, any dry bean, any whole grain in your stockpile can be sprouted. With a glass jar, water, and a piece of cheesecloth, or even a clean piece of thin fabric secured over the top. That's the entire equipment list. Here's how. Measure out about a quarter cup of dry lentils, the red or green lentils already in your stockpile. Rinse them. Soak them in water for 8 hours. Drain the water completely. Then twice a day, morning and evening, rinse them again with water and drain again, keeping the jar tilted at an angle. Within 3 to 5 days, you have lentil sprouts. Lentil sprouts contain approximately 14 to 16 milligrams of vitamin C per 100 grams. Not a replacement for a supplement, but a meaningful supplement to a supplement, and critically, a zero-cost vitamin C source that regenerates itself from the food you're already eating. If your vitamin C tablets run out at month 8 of a 12-month scenario, the sprouting protocol keeps producing fresh micronutrients from your dry stores indefinitely. This also connects to something important about long-term food thinking. The goal is not just to store food. The goal is to build a system that produces nutrition on an ongoing basis. Sprouting turns passive storage into an active living food production capability. No garden required. No outdoor space. Works in any container, in any living situation, year-round. Vitamin C. Multivitamins. And sprouting as your living backup. The immune system infrastructure for everything else on this list. 7 items. That is the entire foundation. Rice. Beans. Oats. Flour, or better, wheat berries. Salt. Honey. Vitamin C. Not a bunker. Not a $10,000 gear kit. Not a rural homestead or a decade of training. 7 specific items chosen for caloric efficiency, verified shelf life, nutritional completeness, and proof from real famines, real wars, and real economic collapses across human history. Before you go out and buy all of it at once, I want to give you one more system that most survival content never talks about, and without it, your long-term stockpile may quietly expire before you ever need it. It's called FIFO. First in, first out. And the principle that professional food storage programs build everything around is this: store what you eat and eat what you store. What that means practically is this. Your stockpile isn't meant to sit untouched in a storage room for 25 years. It's meant to function as a rotating pantry. Once a week, cook from your stockpile in your regular household meals. Rice on Tuesday nights. Lentil soup on Thursdays. Oatmeal on weekend mornings. As you use items, you replace them, buying new stock and placing it at the back of the shelf, using the oldest items from the front first. This keeps your entire stockpile perpetually within its freshest window. It also means that when a crisis actually arrives, your family already knows how to cook and eat these foods. They're not learning under stress. They're executing a familiar routine. The practical rotation principle: aim to rotate through your rice and bean supply once every 2 to 3 years through normal household use. Your salt, honey, and wheat berries can sit untouched for decades. They need no rotation. Your vitamins should be consumed and replaced annually regardless of crisis. Now here's how to build this from zero, 1 week at a time. Week 1. Rice and beans. 150-pound bag of white rice, approximately $25. 10 pounds of mixed dry legumes with priority on lentils, approximately $10. Total $35. You now have the caloric foundation and the protein architecture for one adult for roughly 6 weeks at active labor caloric rates. Week 2. Oats and salt. 25 pounds of rolled oats, approximately $15 to $20. 10 canisters of iodized salt, approximately $20. Total, approximately $40. Morning fuel and electrolyte infrastructure secured. Week 3. Wheat berries and honey. A 45-pound bucket of hard red winter wheat berries, approximately $30 to $40. 2 to 3 jars of raw unfiltered honey, approximately $40 to $60. Total approximately $70 to $100. Bread making capability and your indefinite shelf life, caloric and medical reserves secured. Week 4. Vitamins and fuel planning. One bottle of 1000 mg vitamin C per family member. Approximately $12 to $15 each. A basic multivitamin, approximately $15 to $20. One or two 20-pound propane tanks if you don't have a reliable cooking fuel source, approximately $50 to $60. Total, approximately $80 to $115 for a family of 4. Total investment for a solid 6-month nutritional foundation for one adult, approximately $185 to $210. For a family of 4, roughly $500 to $650 depending on your fuel setup. Less than 2 months of a typical American household's grocery spending. And unlike groceries, this investment grows more valuable every month that global supply chains become less predictable. The people who dismiss this are always the first ones in the checkout line at midnight when something goes wrong. You don't need to prepare for an apocalypse. You need to prepare for the scenarios that have already happened in living memory across dozens of countries: prolonged supply disruptions, economic shocks, regional disasters, extended grid outages. Being 90 days ahead of those scenarios costs under $200. Being 90 days behind them costs everything. If you're watching this and you're starting your stockpile this week, drop a 7 in the comments. Just the number 7. That's all I'm asking for today. I want to know how many people watching this are actually moving from watching to acting. If this gave you something real, a number you can use, a technique you didn't know, a gap in your current plan that you can now fix, subscribe. I put out verified, fact-checked survival and economic preparedness content every week. Not speculation. Not fear. Real numbers, real history, and practical steps you can start today. And next week, we're going directly into something that connects to everything we covered here. The single most dangerous mistake people make when stockpiling water. Not having too little, something far more counterintuitive. Something that a significant number of people actively engaged in preparedness are doing right now that creates a health crisis from inside their own plan. That video may matter more than this one. Hit the notification bell so you're there when it comes out. 7 items. Start with week 1. Your preparation begins today.